Three, two, one. And we are live with our session, the AI's role in the future of AEC, with the one and only Bill Allen.
Hey, everybody.
Before we start, and before Bill can talk a little about himself and make the proper introductions, I'd like to remind everyone. Let me share my screen here so we can all see what I'm talking about. That CG Connect has an amazing lineup of live sessions for this month, for March. So if you go to cgconnect.ks.com, you'll be able to see the complete lineup. We've had a show with Tio, who's watching us right now, Tio Vladov, the Keeping It Realistic with Inez. It was a very nice episode. Now we have our session with Bill, and we have Untold Stories with Inez Degas, an Unscape Community Live, Ask Me Anything with Peter Mitev and Kai Burival. We also have a conversation with Motive by Roderick Bates, the Chaos Campus Live Show. There's a lot going on, really, and you won't want to miss this. So go to cgconnect.chaos.com and secure your place, secure your spot, because we have limited spots, and you, as I said, you won't want to miss it. Now, I'll send the mic over to Bill and let you do your magic. Thank you so much for being with us today, Bill, and I'll be taking the questions on the chat. So if you guys have questions, just make sure that you write them down on the chat so we can pass that on to Bill. All right? So I'll leave it to Bill.
Thanks so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. Those are some great sessions coming up. As you were sharing those, I was getting excited. I was like, man, I want to see this one, and I want to see this. Like, I love. I don't know if you guys ever saw the How I Built This podcast a long time ago on NPR, but some of those reminded me of that, and I love these stories, untold stories. That one especially excites me. So, all humans love a good story. All right. Well, I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully, you guys can see and hear me all right. And I am going to go ahead and kick this thing off. But I want to make sure that we have a lot of good dialogue today. I would love to keep the chat going. So please keep those comments and questions coming in because we're going to be taking those throughout. But just a brief intro to myself and the session. So my name's Bill Allen. I'm actually part of the Chaos team now. We joined the Chaos family last year, actually Valentine's Day of 2025. But my background's in architecture, and I worked at the startup called Evolve Lab, a company I started in 2015. And we did that for just about a little over 9 years. And then we joined the Chaos team, as mentioned, in February of last year. And we were doing a lot of cool things. I think they were cool, but I'm a little bit biased in the space of artificial intelligence. And basically, to segue us to today's discussion, is going to be talking about that kind of this migration, if you will, that we went from traditional tech to using AI. And I want to kind of just talk about and level set us a bit of like where the tech came from, where I feel like it's going. So that way it helps prepare all of us, including those that are listening, for the skills that we need to have in this incredibly fast paced changing environment. So I don't know if you guys can relate, but I feel a little bit of whiplash as fast as everything's moving here. So that's going to be kind of our topic at hand. But before we jump into this, I really want to get to know you guys as well. If you could throw it in the chat, I would love to know who you guys are, where you guys are calling from. If you're an architect, are you an engineer? Are you a contractor? Are you an interior design? Are you a visualization specialist? If you could throw that in the chat so that way we get to know you guys a little better. And that would be incredible. So as people are throwing their comments there in the chat, basically what we're going to be talking about is this big shift. So the big shift is going to be talking about this new tech that's been coming out in the last, I would say, 6 months. I've been telling everybody I have not been this excited about AI for about 2 or 3 years. It seems like everything was kind of really stagnating a bit. We had this kind of tech that was, I don't know, kind of not evolving or changing that fast. And so with that, there wasn't a whole lot going on, but now it seems like there is. So anyways, that's what we're going to be talking about. Looks like we're getting a lot of chat in here. Looks like we got a lot of architects in the room. Director of Design Application. We got ArcViz. Hey, Martin. Tio's from ArcViz. Construction. We do have construction. We have some Viz from UK. Hey, Andy. Amit, 3D ArcViz architect. So it seems like probably about 95% architecture and some interior design, some contractors, and some Viz artists. This is awesome. So I'm hoping like out of this, everyone will get something out of it. We're going to be talking about more than just visualization. So that's the cool thing. I'm going to be talking about visualization and some cool pieces as it relates to visualization, because that's kind of where the tech has been probably the last few years. But with this big shift, things are expanding beyond that. So the second half of our talk, we'll be talking about what else, where we're going. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and advance here. So where are we going? We're going to try to understand the evolution of AI and AEC, kind of talking about where we've been, where we're going, evaluate different integrations of AI inside of BIM workflows, not just, Nana Banana or Stable Diffusion or, pick your AI technology or buzzword, but talking about how these integrate deeply into the products that we all use, Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, etc. Anticipate the impact of agentic AI systems. What is agentic AI? This is now, I was saying, the new buzzword last year. Everything is agentic. So I want to talk about that because I do feel like this year now, finally, that tech is really becoming more mainstream. And it's pretty incredible, honestly. And then at the end here, we'll talk about what skills are required to harness these different technologies. So that's kind of where we're going to be going. So looking at the history of AI, we basically had for a very, very long time what we call rule-based AI. And it was just a series of if-then statements and trying to use machine learning to inform if-thens. Then we had this big breakthrough in 2012 through 2017 where we started having neural networks, and the machines really started learning like we learn, consuming just massive amount of data. And we were able to do this now with the advent of the internet and data centers and computers, and just as everything progressed, this became possible. And then if you guys remember, it seemed like around 2021, 2022, everything started getting crazy. We started getting LLMs, you started getting your chat GPTs, you started getting your mid-journeys, all of this kind of generative AI, text-to-text, text-to-image, image-to-video kind of tech. And then in the last few years, what's been happening is people have started to harness this tech and bring it into our ecosystem, the architecture, engineering, and construction environment, and embed these tools directly inside of there. And so that's been a fundamental shift. So you don't have to go out to some website, but you can use these tools directly inside of Revit or SketchUp or Rhino, whatever your design platform of choice is. And then now, like I said, the agentic AI is really starting to pick up. And this is where things get very, very interesting. And so what happened with a lot of these LLMs, and just to talk about the progression of this, is, as you guys know, we all went to Google if we wanted to learn something or research a certain topic. And we would, search that topic. You click through a bunch of different websites. This is why search engine optimization was so important, so you could get up to the top of those links, right? And what changed is that now you could send, ChatGPT a message, and it would gather all of the website information and then serve that information to you in a very, synthesized, concise kind of way. And I was thinking about this even this week. I get so frustrated with Google, to be honest with you guys, because I'll put in a question and it'll give me an answer. I'll give you an example. Last night, this just happened last night. My wife was asking, I bought some t-shirts, and my wife was asking me, she's like, well, do they have any V-necks, for women? And I said, let me look. And I looked at Google and I said, yeah, they do. And then I went to the website and they didn't. And I was like, why don't they? Why are you saying they do when they don't? And so I was kind of frustrated with Google, and it was because it was like grabbing some information from this product website, and it was inaccurate, and it was bringing it up there. And then I wanted to have a dialogue, like, why did you say that it did when it didn't? And are there other places that do? And my brain has already started to be trained with this kind of, LLM chat GPT interface where I have this conversation with AI, and it's an iterative process, versus just like a one and done. And so that's where the LLMs became really incredible. And so like now for architects, we could start to actually use this LLM and have this kind of iterative interface, this iterative this conversation, just like we're doing right now, and be able to have this back and forth. And so it could, for example, could do code compliance research, and then you could go, yeah, but this is this code relevant to my jurisdiction? Like if I'm in Boulder, Colorado, does this one piece of code, does it apply to this city? And so these are the kind of iterative conversations that you could start to have with the LLM. And then it could do other things like, draft specifications or help you with client communications or, create RFI responses. And it's so funny. There's this ongoing joke, as many of you guys probably know, is like we use AI to write a really long email, to a client. And then that client takes that email, puts it into AI, and then like, just give me the bullet points of what it says. And so it's this funny kind of communication that I think is actually probably not awesome, to be honest with you guys, in the way that we're communicating. We could all be a little bit more concise and a little bit more community driven, if you will. But I digress. So then we go from LLMs to this diffusion-based technology. Okay, now this is where like Stable Diffusion and Flux and Midjourney started coming out, and we started going from just text to text to text to image. I could prompt, and I could get this beautiful rendering, and I could use a project as a substrate and be able to have that be consumed inside of these different technologies. And so it was a fundamental shift, and Sam Altman talks about this, where he says AI will go in this counterintuitive order. It will go like we all expected, like self-driving, semi-trucks or lawyers and, all of that. But certainly you're not going to prompt and get like a design back. No, you are. Like that's what happened, is that we started to have this text to image, and AI started to inform the visualization space, images, videos, those kinds of things. And I did not expect this, to be very honest with you guys. This came out of left field. I certainly did not think that we would prompt and get, some design back. And that's exactly what happened. And so I'd love just on this part here to see like how many of you guys are using this kind of tech. Are you guys started to use beyond just ChatGPT? Have you started to use tools like Veras or like Midjourney or any of the Nana Banana tech? I'd love to know if you guys can throw in the chat there. I'd be curious to know what everyone's using on that space, especially as we're looking at this kind of tech. I know it's been out a few years. I'm sure a lot of people are using it, but it would be awesome to know like what you guys are using and then kind of like your experiences around that. So as people are typing that, the other thing that we started to look at is, could we start to take this kind of tech and bring it directly inside of the design environment? Okay, so we have this tech that usually lives outside of Revit, SketchUp, whatever. This is kind of where my story picks up, is me and my business partner, Ben, shout out to Ben, developed this tool called Veras. And the idea is like, could we harness technologies like Stable Diffusion, like Flux, like Nana Banana, and bring them into the design environment? You wouldn't have to leave that environment, and it would be kind of this more seamless experience, if you will. And so this is where we were like, I wonder if we could take, at the time we used Stable Diffusion, and we brought it into Revit, Rhino, SketchUp, ArchiCAD, Allplan, Vectorworks, Autodesk Forma. And so we went wide. And so this is where you could start to take the AI tech and bring it directly inside of your environment, which reduced the friction. So this is where we partnered up with Autodesk Forma. In this example, you can see like I have my massing model, and I could go through this process of iterating different designs and being able to do that directly inside of Autodesk Forma and be able to, come up with some different concepts, some different color schemes, some different materiality, and be able to use it. It does look like a lot of people, just to shout out some people here. So it does look like a lot of people were using Midjourney, Stable Diffusion, Veras, Nana Banana, Weavy, Render AI, Magnific, Gemini. Awesome. This is cool. Very, very cool. And so these are really cool, cool tech. And then, so this is kind of where we wanted to see if we could bring it inside these programs, as mentioned. So the big value add with a lot of the tech and the problem we were trying to solve. So when I was working in architecture in a past life, I would do a lot of 3D visualization. And the process would be is you would spend weeks, if not months, building out a SketchUp or a Revit model. I then would apply all those materials to that scene. I would then apply my, trees, the people, the cars to make it look like, not just an empty model, but a lively model. Then you would, hit render. If you guys remember, we all had these render farms, and you would hit render before you went to bed. It would network all the computers together. You come in the morning and then pray that, your rendering was good. And if not, you had to wait a whole nother day. You had to, fix whatever was wrong and then kick it off that evening. And then I started using Rhino and Grasshopper and Dynamo. And so I was starting to try to figure out, could I build the model dynamically so I could create a lot of different design options versus just one to try to speed up the process. But there was still this bottleneck of like applying materials and, setting up your camera angles and then hitting render. So it didn't really help out all that much. And then what happened was AI came out, and you could prompt and it would shortcut this whole process. So I didn't necessarily need a full detailed model. I could just, prompt and have a substrate or do text to image and create this model. And I didn't need to apply the materials. I didn't need to set up the different camera angles. I didn't have to, drop in the entourage into the scene, apply, the lighting, and then hit render. I could literally just shortcut that whole process. And this is why the technology exploded, is because we were able to do this as part of this process. So what changed was a fundamental shift of where we used to model to render. We then now render to model. Okay, so before we create the model, apply our materials, post-process it, render it. Now we go through and we start with a render and we start to ideate. So it's like this, bringing the ideation, the Pinterest, if you will, into this environment, and then using it as a design tool, which is crazy. It's a fundamental shift to how people are working, is that we're starting to start with the rendering first before we do anything else. And then so what's really nice about this, and specifically to the Veras app that we were trying to build, is it would use your project as the substrate. And so it would honor or respect, if you will, the geometry, but you could, play with different materiality, or if you wanted, the AI to have a little bit of creative freedom but not go crazy. This was the sweet spot that we were trying to hit, so that way you were still in the driver's seat, still in control, and being able to use Veras in this way, and being able to explore materials and all of that. And so that was kind of what we were trying to do. And that way you had some consistency throughout, if you will. You could just, go straight text to image. The challenge with that a lot of times is it didn't take into account, your floor-to-floor heights, your setbacks, your constraints, your programmatic requirements, all those kinds of things that are really, really important for a project. And then so what this does is it completely upends and the traditional workflow in being able to create this efficient way of working. So you can see like this idea of like project time and iteration speed allows us to create a lot of iterations. Renderings are cheap. Like, okay, maybe it's, a few cents per rendering, and you create a few hundred or a few thousand of those options. That adds up. But that's way, way, way less expensive than what we used to have to do of spending weeks modeling something and creating, that rendering, as I mentioned. And so this drastically speeds up the process, which is incredible. Okay, so then what happened, kind of transitioning us to the last, I'd say, 4 months, Nano Banana came out. And this tech is incredible. I can't explain to you guys how excited I am about this technology. And so this last December, we saw the value of this, and we brought this inside of Veras. And one of the things that it did is it unlocked these new workflows that did not exist before. And what it does is, rather than just taking your substrate and, for lack of a better term, as a glorified Photoshop tool where you then would add, materials and a sky and all that, it unlocked these new workflows that did not exist before. So like an example of this would be, you could feed it a 2D floor plan, and then using Nano Banana inside of Veras, we could then create a 3D model or a 3D image, a perspective from that 2D floor plan. So I could have just, an AutoCAD, SketchUp, whatever floor plan, and then I could prompt Veras/Nano Banana to create a 3D rendering of that, and it would do it. And this blew my mind because this tech, this wasn't possible just 6 months ago. This came out and I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And so this was one of the workflows that really caught my attention, that we could start to harness, because again, this fast tracks that whole process, and being able to have what I call design persistency, being able to have different perspectives of the same space and to honor, that different perspective. I will say it's not perfect. There are still some artifacts, and there's some things that we're working on our side to get this even more dialed in. But it gets pretty darn close, which is pretty cool. The other workflow that I thought was pretty cool is the idea of taking a model and then creating an axiometric diagram from that. So you could take your 3D model, pump it through the Veras/Nano Banana engine, and then create a diagram for that. So here's an example of this kind of parametric bench. And then I could take that and, build this beautiful diagram. You could do this for buildings. You can do this for furniture. And if you're interested, just shameless plug, I did a session, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, specifically on Nano Banana and some of these workflows. So if you do go to the CG Connect, I believe you should be able to go back and check those out. And that was a session that we did just a few weeks ago, explicitly just looking at the Nano Banana tech and seeing these different workflows that you could do inside of Veras with it. The other one that, shout out to Dave Siki on our team, showed me, which I thought was pretty cool, is this idea of taking a mood board and then applying that to your scene. So what you do is you take, you could create, you could curate your mood board manually, like you usually do with Pinterest and PowerPoint and InDesign and all of those kinds of tools, and then curate a mood board manually. But you could actually have Veras look at a scene, create a mood board from that, and then take that mood board and then apply it to future projects. And then so that was a workflow that we started to utilize as well. So one of the presets I have inside of Veras is this mood board preset, and you can see this is kind of my mood board that I created with Veras, and then I took that mood board and I can use the images input reference, and then I can apply that mood board to my scene. And so you can see like this restaurant here, it's consuming my mood board and then applying that information to my restaurant. Also, side note, this whole PowerPoint Google slide, I also did using this same process. So even up to last night, I was working on this, and I wanted to create this consistency of format. I kind of dig this like RGB, cartoony kind of style. And so I was like, oh, I wonder if I could, apply that in the same way. So I actually created a mood board for this presentation. And then a lot of the backgrounds you guys will see in this have been completely created using Veras. 100% of this presentation, the backgrounds, all of that was using this same workflow. And that was how I was able to create this consistency from one slide to the next. It's something I'd never seen before. You typically will have a template in PowerPoint or Google Slide. I know this is a digression, but just to give you a little bit of how the sausage was made today in this presentation. And I was like, I wonder if I could do this and curate, an AI image, but create that consistency throughout. And this is how I did it. I created the whole thing with Veras, created that mood board, and then I would create these different backgrounds using this process. So anyways, digression, but just so you know about that. Okay, so now talking about the big shift. This is where things really get exciting and a little bit scary, to be honest. So there is this change that's been happening. Again, last 2 to 3 years, everything's pretty much been the same. Some new features or workflows have kind of surfaced. Models have gotten a little bit better, but they've kind of just iterated on what's already existed. So we might have like a text-to-image tool or an image-to-image, and then, Flux comes out and, oh, this model's a little bit better than Stable Diffusion. And then Nano Banana comes out and you're able to do these workflows that didn't exist before, right? Well, there's other things that are happening in this space as well, not just images. And that's where I want to touch on now, is kind of talking about where I'm personally seeing this threshold and this shift happening in the architecture, engineering, and construction space. So The three big shifts that I'm seeing is now we're going beyond just images, but we're starting to see generative AI for BIM. Okay, so now you're going from a text to image to a text to build me a model. Okay. The other thing I'm seeing is the automation of construction drawings. Okay, using an LLM, prompting and being able to create a construction set from that. And then this other big piece that's really taking off now is this idea of agentic AI, using agents to help, fast track processes, to do certain tasks, to problem solve, etc. So these are kind of the three main categories now I'm going to touch on this piece. And I'd love your guys' opinion. Keep the chat coming in on questions you guys are having, because we're going to start to get to some of these here very, very soon. So the first big shift is using AI to create BIM elements. And so we're starting to look at this internally at Chaos, and my team specifically is starting to work on this process. So shout out to Dan on our team. He's actually working on this. And what he's doing is he's actually using this tech to do generative light layouts. So over on the right here, we have an Enscape model. You can see it's totally empty. And then now we can use generative AI to populate a scene with actual light fixtures. So you can see over on the left is our interface, where you can start to do what I call multi-objective optimization. And you could see what your trade-offs are for different designs. And then from there, you could actually see the lights populate over on the Revit model, bottom left. And then over on the right side in Enscape, those showing up as part of your rendering. And so this is starting to use AI to actually generate BIM objects, and they're optimized for the scene based on the illumination, the foot candles, all of those kinds of things. So that's something that we're starting to explore internally. The other thing that we're starting to look at is the automation of construction drawings using AI. So, one of the things that we all talked about is like, man, AI is taking all the fun part, the creative part from us. What about really the mundane thing? This was the promise of AI, is to be able to automate a lot of things that we don't necessarily want to do. And I will say, I actually like putting together drawings. I geek out about a good construction drawing set, but there's a lot of clicks and picks that happen in that don't need to happen, that are not non-value adding clicks and picks. You're going to dimension a curtain wall. Well, clicking every single mullion and creating the offset for that, and then going to your next 400 sheets and doing that same process over and over and over and over again. It's just we're on an assembly line, just putting together these drawing sets like an old school factory worker. And so we wanted to ask ourselves, is there a better way? And so we developed this tool called Glyph. You can actually use it right now if you wanted to. You could go to the website, you could download it. It's totally working. It's not a beta program. It's totally functioning. And so if you actually wanted to try this out, you can do it. So I'm going to show you guys how this works. So with this, what I can do is I can use the LLM inside of Glyph. And I will say it has an AI component and a non-AI component. So if you're like, I don't really want to use the LLM, I want to just use clicks and picks like a traditional user interface, you can do that. But because we're talking about AI, I'm going to be showing you guys the AI portion of it. So in this example, I can say elevate rooms 103 through 107, and it's able to do that. So you can see here, I type in elevate rooms 103 through 107, and boom, it's dropping in all those elevation markers for me. Now, what's pretty cool about this is that because it's an LLM, it's a language model, it understands that I said through 103 through 107. And it goes through and then clicks, 104, 105, 106, all those kind of intermediate rooms, and drops into elevation, which is pretty freaking cool. And then the other thing I can do is use the same logic and create enlarged plans. So then I could say, hey, create enlarged plans of rooms 103 through 107, and it's able to do that. I could do this with, all the rooms that contain the word kitchen. So it could go through and elevate and create enlarged plans of all my kitchens or all my bathrooms. These are often spaces, special spaces in architecture that we start to create more detailed information around. I could ask it, to create the sheets inside of my Revit model. I could say, create sheets for rooms 101 through 125. And in a few seconds, it literally will create, 25 sheets, name them correctly. This again is a non-value adding thing that we do all the time in architecture inside of Revit. So being able to have it automate that. The most popular feature that it does is dimensioning. So I could ask it, to dimension floor plans for me. You can tell it to dimension to finish fascia stud or finish exterior, or only dimension the interior walls but not the exterior walls. Dimension the windows, don't dimension the doors. You can go through and have this conversation, and then it will go through and dimension an entire floor plan for you, which is insane. Like, this takes so much time, and if you had to do this manually, it would be very time consuming. Same thing for interior elevations. If I wanted to dimension all this casework, which by the way we do in architecture, we either have a dimension in here or dimension and tag, where we actually start to call out all the widths, depths, and heights of the casework. You can ask it to go through and dimension all the interior casework. Question someone has is it like an MCP? No, it is not. So in here, it's working directly inside of Revit. No agentic components to it yet. Another question was, is it compatible with ArchiCAD? Not yet. Those are things that are on the docket. We actually rebuilt the UI to make it web-based, so that way it could be ported over to other tools like ArchiCAD and SketchUp and other ones. Yes, it's only specific to Revit at the moment. And we did that because at the time Revit, and I still think this is true, was the main tool that people were using to curate construction documents. But as mentioned, we made it web-based, so that way we could in the future port it over to other platforms. And there's some other things coming too that will make it transcend and make it not just one software specific, but be able to transcend to other softwares. Good questions. All right, keep the questions coming. I'm going to keep going though. Automating curtain wall dimensions, you can do this as well. So you could ask it, to dimension your curtain walls. One thing I like to point out on this example is you can see like all these dimension strings have the exact same offset, which actually you cannot do inside of Revit to have this consistent offset with your dimensions. I've built as a BIM manager all these different templates to try to get consistency inside of a set of drawings, but you kind of have to eyeball it a bit. With this, you could actually have the dimension offset, 1 foot, 2 foot, whatever, and it creates that consistency across the drawings. And not only does it do it in one, like here, I don't know, I probably have about 10 views on this sheet, and it's doing them all in one go. I literally could have 10 elevations per sheet, 1,000 sheets, and ask it to dimension all 1,000 sheets with 10 elevations on each sheet, and it will go through and dimension all those sheets for me, which is insane. So that drastically, speeds up that process. The other thing it does as well is tagging. So not just view creation, sheet creation, but dimensioning and tagging as well. So then I could go through and tag. I used to do this in architecture in a past life. I had to tag all my curtain wall panels, and you had to say if they're spandrel or fritted or not fritted. And so when you start to go through this process, you do get a tag all not tagged in Revit, but I have to activate every one of these views. So I have to activate view, tag all not tagged, deactivate view, activate next view, tag all not tagged, etc. So you still can't do it at scale, this tag all not tagged. And so this is a way you can do this, across views and across sheets. I think we have another question here from Frank. He says, can you use Glyph to 3D model a house in Revit? So no, Glyph is an auto documentation tool explicitly, so it has no modeling capabilities to it. But the other app that I was showing you could start to do generative BIM, as I was showing earlier with like the lighting design example. So we're starting to get into other building components as well. Glyph is exclusively a documentation tool at the moment, so you can use it just to fast track and automate construction documents. Great question. Now, if you gave me a tool that auto-dimensioned my project or auto-tagged my project or created sheets or created views, that's awesome. Like, it does this one thing and does it really, really well. The other thing that we did is we built it out so that you could daisy chain these tasks into a macro task, or what we call a bundle. So what you're seeing right here is this is the curtain wall bundle that ships with Glyph. And what you could do is you could run it and it will elevate your curtain walls. It will dimension your curtain wall mullions. It could create your sheets for your curtain walls and then drag and drop those views onto a sheet with one click, which is insane. So again, you could run any one of these tasks independently, like I was showing with the previous slides. But with this, I actually could now run multiple tasks in sequence, in parallel together, and it will do that. And you can create your own task. You can create your own bundles. You can create whatever dimension styles you want it to use, whatever tags you want it to use. It also has a collision avoidance to make sure the tags and the dimensions don't overlap. And so you can create all of these yourself, or you could use the ones that ship with it. So I think I see another question in there from Santiago. Tags, type marks, and identity parameters need to be set up by each BIM element type family in order for Glyph to get the date. I think that's supposed to say data for tags, generation, etc. That is correct. So it does not fill out, well, it does fill out some information. Actually, there is a parameter setter, and it does have the ability, for example, to set the sheet names and grab the floor plan, for example, and then set the parameter for the sheet name. So some of the parametric data it will actually populate. But yes, largely it's counting on you to have the data that's inside of your project and then tag or annotate the information, the metadata that's inside of there. Next question from Amit. Can it generate customized facade elevation and label them? Can it generate custom facade elevations? Yes, it can elevate facades and it can label them. And it can label them based on information you give it. Like if you have a facade and it has a curtain wall, a certain type mark or something like that, and you want that represented in your elevation, it can do that if that's the question. And then also, can it generate kitchen storage elevations from a box, like a storage design, for example? Yes. You could have the information for a storage object, whether it's a room or an area or casework or a unit, and it can grab that information and then create a document for it. Another question from Frank. Can you use Glyph to create in-store takeoff for retail? Ooh, good question. So if the information is in your model for the takeoffs, it can curate schedules for you. So it'll create a schedule, can create a sheet. When I did this, I did it mainly in healthcare design, where I would create room data sheets and it grabbed the information for that and place them onto a sheet for me. So as long as the data is inside of the element and inside of the schedule, it could grab that information for you, but it's not explicitly or the most robust takeoff tool, if that makes sense. Is there an undo function from Tim if the function/prompt doesn't work as intended? Yes, so you can undo, like in this example, if I created these views and dimensioned, and then I look at them like, oh man, the dimension, wasn't in the right place or something like that. Can I undo it? Yes, with limitations. So let's say like you run this and then a week goes by and then you look at your drawing set on some view that you didn't look at when you ran Glyph, and then you want to go back in time a week ago. You cannot do that. So it has to be in the same session of Revit at the moment where you run it, and then you could undo it. The one thing you can do, though, I will say, there's this funny acronym called CRUD, and CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, Delete. And so what it does is Glyph does have CRUD. So let's say you run this curtain wall bundle, and it dimensions your curtain walls, and then in 2 weeks you change the curtain wall design, and your dimensions are all squirrely because now the curtain wall model has changed. You could rerun Glyph, and it will update the dimensions, create new ones that didn't exist before, and read the information in there and be able to do that using that technology as well. So being able to use CRUD to be able in Glyph to update information in the future, it does do that. From Patrick, is it possible to share the recording for this session? I will default to Rick and the CG Connect team on what we are doing. Okay, Rick says yes. Thanks, Rick. He said we are able to share the recording. So thanks for that. All right. Keep the questions coming, guys. I'm going to keep going, though, just to keep this train moving. The next topic I'm going to be talking about is Agentic AI. So this is blowing my mind. I'm going to be honest with you guys. Like, this is pretty insane. Think of like Glyph on steroids, like how I just showed you guys the ability to automate dimensions or to create these bundles where I can, daisy chain all these tasks together. This Agentic AI works a very, very similar way. What it's able to do, well, let's just get into it. I have a point on this. I'm actually going to go here and then I'll go back. So the AI piece of it, if you look at this comparing characteristics kind of on the bottom slide here, this is kind of the difference of standard AI versus agentic AI. So in the top left, we talk about, Veras and Stable Diffusion, Nano Banana. It's very niche AI. Like, you ask it to do a task and it does that one task. All right. Create a 3D perspective for me in a watercolor style, make the building, mid-century modern, go. And it creates a rendering for me. One shot, right? Same thing with ChatGPT. Okay, do this. Look at the building codes. Give me a curated list of what building codes are appropriate to my region. Go. And it does that thing, right? Now, OpenAI and ChatGPT are implementing agents, okay? And so are others. And we're working on this as well, where you could actually give it a goal, okay? I want the goal to optimize my building design based on solar wind studies. I need it to be cost effective. So I also want you to do a cost analysis. I also want you to serve me and tell me what the top 3 most optimal options are. And I want you to serve it to me in a Google slide deck. Okay. Now with that, it is now working with multiple parameters, multiple software products. It's working with multiple constraints, different goals, different objectives that actually are compartmentalized in different parts of our workflow processes. And the agent is going through and taking all of these goals together, and it's being able to aggregate those goals and execute those goals, and then come back to us as the human and to say, hey, here is this output, this result, which is pretty insane. And this is becoming real. Like, this is happening now. And this is why I call it the big shift. This is where the technology takes a fundamental shift in the way that we've been working in the last 2 to 3 to 4 years and amplifies that on another level. So I'm going to go back just a few slides. Talking about this tech OpenClaw. I learned about this a few weeks ago. And OpenClaw, for those that don't know, it's an open source autonomous AI agent designed to perform real world tasks on behalf of a user. Instead of generating text like a chatbot, it can interact with software, run commands, access files, and automate workflows across different applications. Okay, so I saw a YouTube video on this where this guy gives his OpenClaw agent, he names him Henry, and he asked Henry, because he's a YouTuber, to curate, these different outlines for his next 3 YouTube, videos or whatever. He also wants Henry to research, what are people looking for in AI videos? Go scour the internet and give me, the 10 top most research topics that people are looking for as it relates to AI videos. And then, give me the outlines. And then also I want you to check some of my emails. I know I've been getting backed up on emails. If you could respond to some of those, do that as well. And it actually executes it. It does that thing. Now, with great power comes great responsibility. People are saying with this tech, you want to put it on its own computer. You don't want it on your work computer. Test it first. Make sure it's doing what you want it to do. Because it could, reply to your boss and say something not so nice. So those are some things that, the tech could do that you would not want it to do. And this tech actually was coded using like vibe coding, like where you can prompt and get different results and different software put together. And as of mid-February this year, this is how recent this is, 2026, OpenClaw, also referred to Claudebot or Moldbot, is widely reported as the first one person, okay, had one person that developed it, that vibe coded it. He was an AI startup and reached $1 billion evaluation and got acquired by OpenAI. Okay, one person developed this application. So this is the other thing that AI is doing, is it's able to create tools and features that have not existed before. And so this individual was able to do that using this tech, then build, a program that does this kind of tech, and then got acquired by OpenAI for $1 billion, which is crazy. So this is why I'm a little nervous, but also a little excited. Like, I see the opportunity because I'm drastically behind on my emails, and I'm drastically behind on this FAQ I'm supposed to do. And I have this prompting ebook I want to work on. Like, I'm just sharing with you guys all of my to-do list, and I have to do all these things. Wouldn't it be great if I could have like an assistant that I could be like, hey, I haven't reached out on this email, or I have all these FAQs I got to start curating. Could you help me build the FAQ? And then I could review it and then be like, yes, it's good, or make these few tweaks, and then it updates the FAQ, and then I send it out. Like something like that would be drastically helpful. So I also see the value in this as well. So I'm going to pause there and just see, I do see Marcia's question. I want to touch on that one. Some of the tools that we are working on, are they part of the Chaos Design Suite? Veras is at the moment. It's part of the Enscape Premium and the Arc Design suite that we have. Glyph is not yet. To be determined in the near future. I would love if you guys could put in the chat if you think Glyph, the auto documentation tool, would be good within the Chaos suite, because that's something that I think a lot of us are debating, if like you guys would get value out of having that as part of your Enscape workflow and part of your Veras workflow. So that's great. Thank you guys for putting that in there. Okay, I'm going to keep going here, but please keep that chat going, asking questions, making comments. We talked about the AI versus agentic AI piece. And I want to talk about the different way that agentic AI works. Like, it works differently than regular AI works. And so what it does is it looks at like a whole bunch of series of things that you have to do, and it breaks them down into tasks or steps. And then it uses all these third-party tools to be able to curate, a problem, or try to solve a problem that's been curated. It validates those results, it iterates on that, and then it goes through and serves that back to us as the human, and iterates towards that goal. So that's kind of the way this technology works specifically. And so like an example of this, and I used to have to do this in a past life, is doing like model health audits and 3D coordination and creating reports, and then having meetings, and then, oh, did you move the pipe? And then having another meeting and looking at the model health report. You could go through and have some of this agentic AI technology do multiple different tasks that you want it to do, and daisy chain all those tasks together. So, creating the model health reports, moving the pipe if it's been approved to move, creating the cost budget for that pipe being moved. Look at if it made sense to do it from a cost as well as from an engineering standpoint, and then report back to me all the changes that you made. So you could have all these series of steps that could be done using some of these agentic AI tech, and then having it, curate that list and bring it back to you. Okay, I'm going to transition now to the skills that will matter most to us during this big shift, this change that's happening. Before I do that, Rick, are there any other questions you'd like to serve me here that you think we should touch on? I see one, I think, of documentation as different part of the project, so don't think it would have to be bundled. Good question, or good comment, Marcia. Thanks for the input on that. One thing I would say, just as a counterpoint to that, it's a good comment, but one thing I'm thinking of is with Chaos, we've primarily been focused on visualization as a company. And there's obviously multiple facets of a project, more than just visualization, that you guys all do. And so one of the things we're looking at is, could we actually touch on different parts of the project and add the most amount of value to you guys? So could you actually use, the AI BIM tool to help generate your lights? But then also, now you're ready to dimension those lights. Could you use Glyph now to dimension the lights on your same project? So we're trying to look at this like overall life cycle of the project, and then being able to have tools that intersect, those different parts of the project to add the most amount of value and streamline those processes, because they're so fragmented right now. Okay, I'm working on the design of the lights. Now I need to document the lights. Yes, those are two different things, but I do have to do that as far as a workflow process. So it would be cool to, have that not so fragmented and disconnected. So good question on that. But thanks for your feedback. Other questions I see coming in: clash analysis by an AI agent. Will it be possible to quantify the level of interference? For sure, 100%. So you can already do this with Navisworks and other clash detection tools, where you can see a tolerance. We do this a lot of times when like pipes, for example, have insulation around them. Well, you might not model the insulation, and there might be 1 inch insulation or 2 inch insulation. So we call that a soft clash, where, okay, there's not insulation modeled, but I could see the tolerance of that. So yes, 100%. And these are the kind of parameters, which actually might be a good segue for us into this piece, like as we're starting to think of the parameters that we'll have to have. So in number 2 up in the top, this is what we're talking about, is like understanding the constraints, setting those boundaries, the project limitations. If we're going to have that insulation in there, what parameters do you want to send, your agentic AI to interrogate as part of your model? The other thing we'll have to think about is like systems thinking. Like, okay, if we're looking at the whole life cycle of a project, and we have these different things that we want to do. We want to do cost analysis. We want to do daylighting. We want to have our programmatic requirements. What are the different connections, that we want to curate and have an agentic AI help us, solve with some of this? We also need to understand, the logic behind it. Like, for example, you probably don't want to do a daylighting analysis before you do your space plan, right? Doesn't make sense. It's like you would have, why would you create a daylight around a program that doesn't exist yet, for example, right? So you would want to start your programming first, and then, okay, now start to look at my daylighting. And then, so I did healthcare a lot, healthcare design. Nurse travel distances were a big thing. Daylighting was a big thing. Cost estimation was a big thing. And there's an order and a sequence of events that you have to think about, of like when you would do certain tasks versus others. The other piece is knowing what to automate. There's a lot of things that we don't want to automate. A lot of things like maybe, for example, you don't want it to automate, the visualization piece. You like doing that. You want to be able to use Veras or other things to be able to do that and do the prompting and get your different results. Maybe you're a code expert, and maybe it makes sense for the AI to interrogate the code, but you want the final say, of course, and what code books you want to use, which jurisdictions, which code analysis that you want to use for your project. Knowing what to automate is going to be really important as well, because there's going to be a lot of things that we don't want to automate or leave in the hands of an AI, but we want to do manually. So these are things that I personally feel in the next 6 months to 2 years, we're going to need to have this kind of knowledge, just like we did on the Glyph piece of like automating our construction drawings. We need to know, what dimension styles we're using, what tag styles to use, how to place the views on the sheets to drive, that automation. If you take that same logic and put that at scale and amplify that across a project, we're going to need to know these certain things. We're going to need to know how to parameterize the agentic AIs, and also how to set up the constraints and know what to automate and what not to automate. So these are skills that will be really important. The big piece I want everybody to really understand is that AI is not taking your job, okay? AI, someone that uses this tech will take your job, by the way. I'll be very candid with you. If you do not adapt with the tech, or, maybe where you live or your marketplace doesn't need this tech piece. Like that's cool. But the people that harness this tech are going to be the winners, in my opinion. And so it's very similar to, when we were going from CAD, drafting boards to CAD, from CAD to BIM. And now BIM is becoming a requirement, in a lot of different countries. The people that were in that place are winning the projects because they're already there. And then the other thing is it helps them to be competitive. And the thing that this also does is it democratizes this technology so that if you are a one-person shop, in Costa Rica, you can have the same access to the tech that someone else, some 1,000-person firm in Denver, Colorado has. You know what I mean? So it democratizes that, and then you become the orchestrator of this. So that was the point I was trying to make. Sorry for this digression there. But you get to be the orchestrator of this tech. And so very similar to, the AI rendering tech, right? The AI rendering isn't putting you out of a job. You're using the tech to create a rendering. Same thing with Revit. I always like to use this analogy. With Revit, I might have a model and then I could drop in an elevation marker inside of Revit and it elevates that bathroom for me because of the technology, right? And then I drop that view on the sheet. I don't go, wait a sec. I wanted to draw that bathroom elevation. I wanted to take it. I wanted to draw the toilet, the handle. I wanted to have, an elevation of that light fixture and the faucet. That tool is taking my job. Well, no, it's not. What it's doing is you're dropping in the elevation marker of something that you modeled, and it helps you fast track that elevation. And so this tech is very similar. As you're harnessing the tech to help you do your process more optimally and do it faster. And this is my humble opinion. And also part of this, you guys are welcome to disagree. Of course, like this is part of the thing that we all grow as we have thoughtful dialogue and conversations around this and what is practical versus not practical, etc. So feel free to push back on that. But that is my personal opinion on this, is that it's a tech that we can actually harness. Even in this presentation I mentioned, the AI didn't take my job of building this presentation. I prompted and I gave, I was interacting with it and iterating on these different graphics and all of those kinds of things. I'm still the orchestrator. I'm in the driver's seat, but I'm leveraging the tools because there's 0% chance I could have created all these diagrams and visuals and everything in the time allotted that I had to give this presentation to you guys. I'm just harnessing the tools and giving it feedback and being able to use it. So very similar in the same way. But again, my humble opinion, feel free to disagree on that. I do think we got another question from Patrick, potentially. Let me know. All right. What route are you guys going with this AI? Are you looking to develop Glyph to analyze and connect BIM objects to check with NBS specs, check ISO naming conventions with current models inside of Revit for BIM contracts, close to Plannerly, but with AI automation? Good question. So right now, Glyph primarily sits, again, in the camp of auto documentation. If there's other features and we get feedback from you guys of like, hey, it does this, but it would be really cool if it did this, we would start to build out that. What we're trying to do with Glyph right now is we're trying to make sure it can consume your guys' standards for your projects and then represent those standards accurately rather than having to configure it manually. So that's what we're working on at the moment, and then being able to push it to an environment that's more scalable too. So you could apply it not just to one project, but maybe 10 projects, for example. So those are the two main things that we're working on for Glyph at the moment. I love all the conversations around Glyph. It seems like Glyph has stole the show, which is great and funny. But good questions and comments. Next question. I think we got one from Stan, Notebook LM for the presentation. I don't know what that means. Forgive me, Notebook LM. Maybe give me a little bit of clarification on what you're looking for on that, and I'd be happy to answer that one. Boris says, I think a possible point is that it might have not taken your job, but it potentially takes the job of the designer who would have helped you make that presentation. Potentially, correct, yeah. That is a thing. Like we have people like Chaos that help us put together presentations. I did not engage those people at all in the creation of this presentation. I built it myself but I would say that it's helping me kind of be like an assistant. And I would say too, a lot of those people that are still working on these presentations and help curate them are using the tech as well. But yes, very good comment on that. It is a fundamental shift in the way that we work and the tools that we use on that for sure. Okay, I want to transition maybe now explicitly to the Q&A. I know we had some questions here, but any other questions that are coming up, burning questions or comments that you guys have? I think Frank says, will Comfy UI give you more control for AI? Yes, there are some things in Comfy UI like ControlNet and other things like that that give you more control on that piece. Rick, what else? What questions are you thinking here you want us to grab? Where do you want to go with this conversation, sir?
Well, I think there's a good question from Richard here. Is Veras AI using Google Gemini also for creating videos? Which is, I think it's a nice clarification on the use of Nano Banana and so on.
Yeah, good question. So Glyph is not currently using Gemini. We're exploring some things in that space. But the video piece, Veras does have an image to video piece to it. That also is not using Google Gemini's VO or any of that piece. We're actually using the 2.2 model on that. But we are heavily looking at the Google one and some other ones, and we'll be implementing some other AI models into Veras, into Glyph, and into our generative design tools. Good question.
We have another question here from Tio. Great presentation, Bill. Really enjoyed it. So have we. My question, looking at the future, do you see Veras coming to Corona, V-Ray, Vantage, etc.?
Yes, for sure. So that is something that we're definitely looking at and is on the docket. I'd love for you guys to comment if you see value in that. So there's this idea of going wide versus deep, right? So wide, we integrated Veras into all these BIM platforms. The one I forgot to mention is that we do have Veras directly inside of Enscape as well. And we're looking at an integration into V-Ray, Corona, and some of the other ones as well. But would love your guys' thoughts if you would see value in that.
Yeah, and this is a very good question, at least in my opinion, from Onyx. Can you suggest Chaos devs to move AI cloud features to local? Since we all have good GPUs, that's a very persistent question, actually. Can those tools work locally instead of relying on the cloud?
Yeah, so that is something that we've been looking at for sure, of using a local instance of that. The challenge we have is when people have different hardware requirements, we're able to control some of that by having it be in the cloud and have a consistent environment for it to be able to create the renderings. So at the moment, we've been going that angle, but we have been looking at what you would call an on-prem solution where you could run it locally. This actually is very pragmatic and actually helpful for people that have sensitive projects like government projects or other things that you don't necessarily want going in out to the cloud to process. And so that if, again, I encourage you guys to throw it in the chat if that is something that you see value in. We would absolutely want to talk about that and see if we could get it implemented.
Now, regarding that, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Which is, like, we know that running AI models locally is very energy consuming, time consuming. And I give you an example. I was upscaling a video here for the podcast, and I'm using Topaz software, and it literally crashed my computer because it took over 24 hours to upscale the video. So I think that maybe we're looking here at a matter of timing, actually, because if you run it locally, it will certainly take longer than it would if you ran it on the cloud, right?
Yeah, so good question. So that is definitely something that we look at and actually actively implement. So we did this a long time ago when we were using Stable Diffusion, and we
optimized our servers so that way there's this thing called a cold start. Would cold start a server, wake it up, you'd have to then load the model. We did all these things behind the scenes so that way it didn't consume so much energy. And we actually did the same thing. This is most relevant just last week and this week. So we're implementing Nano Banana 2, and Nano Banana 2 uses less memory, or less GPU power rather, than the full version. And so it's just about as good, like as far as quality. And so the processing, I want to say, is about like 50% less for about 90% of the quality, which is insane. And so what's happening is with these AI companies, they'll create this tech. It's very cost heavy and GPU heavy to process it. And then what they do is they take the model. I'm not good at this or understand the tech enough. Ben on our team would understand this. This is my absolute probably poor analogy, and it probably breaks down. But a zip file, how you zip a file and you compress it, it's kind of like that. Like it takes all of that information, compresses it, makes it more efficient for the computing of it, and then gives you the result of it. So this week, even with our new release of Veras 4.2, we'll have the Nano Banana 2 inside of it, which will be significantly less GPU heavy, with just about as good as quality. And actually, it's better in my experience so far. Sorry, I'm talking a lot on this, but I've been testing it last week and this week, and it does a better job prompt adherence. So like it listens to me better for the prompting. And I actually been telling Ben on our team, who oversees the Veras product, I think the quality is better, which is counterintuitive, but it is, in my opinion, in my experience. So anyways.
We have another question here. It may be off topic, but I would like to ask if there are any plans to create an AI that will directly create, generate, or work on design standards. Great options for standard closures, fastening, or cladding details. That's very specific. I mean, when the design is assembled in masses and requires, let me show it again, requires further detailing, be it furniture, interior, cladding, or an AI that will offer you standard simple details or work according to specific brands. That sounds complex.
It is, but I think I understand it, and I think Glyph already does this. So if you have your standards for your project, and Miguel on our team who oversees the Glyph product just implemented assembly support inside of there, so you can actually now document assemblies. If you have those assemblies with all of their parameters and data and standards, that information can be documented. Now, again, it's not creating the standards for you. It's just taking your firm's standards, whatever those are, the dimension styles, the tags you use, your parameters that you populate, etc. It grabs those standards and scales them, or amplifies them, if you will, based on that. Now, the other piece I mentioned that we're working on is being able to create standards with Glyph, where it could consume, say, 100 drawings, and then say, oh, it looks like you always dimension to finish face of stud. Let's make that a standard. So that's something that we're looking at.
All right. So does anybody have any more questions? We are approaching the end of our time slot. So I think we still have there you are. It's good that we call people up. Is it possible to fine-tune the AI rendering output at specific areas using scribbles, annotations, markings, using stylus, like prompting on the output image instead of outside prompt box?
Yes. So actually, this is one of the big advantages of using Veras versus just some of these standalone tools. We have annotation tools inside of Veras, and even again for this presentation, I used it extensively. Like I would see some weird hallucination artifact or something, and I would use the scribble tool, and I would circle this thing and say, hey, replace this text with this thing, or update this graphic here, or swap A and B, and I would draw graphics on the screens using the Veras Draw tool, and then I would prompt and say, okay, now update this, and then it would do that based on my scribble or my drawing or my render selection. So yeah, you can totally do that using this tech.
Cool. And we have a legal question from Adam. With increased AI integration and automation, who maintains licensing ownership of the work generated? Very, very good question, in my opinion.
Very good question. And maybe if we can, I'm going to see, unless you have access to it, Rick, I'll grab our responsible AI link and drop it in the chat. We actually have, because this comes up a lot regarding who owns the output of the image that was created? Is Chaos doing any kind of machine learning on my projects? All of these kinds of questions. So the punchline, I'll answer it though concisely and in layman's terms. And I'm not a lawyer, so I say, do your own due diligence, but we have looked at this. This is just Bill's opinion, is that because you're using your project as the substrate for a lot of these designs, you own that. So the analogy I always like to use is, let's say you model the Eiffel Tower in Revit, and then you use Veras to render that Eiffel Tower, and then you present it to your client, and you're like, hey, look at this great design I made. And they're like, that looks an awful lot like the Eiffel Tower. You would say, well, maybe. But if you're not doing that, if you're, actually designing your own project and you have your own space program, your own parameters, and then you're using Veras to visualize that project, it's of our opinion that you own the output of that data. And I'll also say this applies to the US more than it does to the rest of the world, depending on where you're calling in from. But the US just passed last year with the United States Trademark Office that they said if a human edits an AI image, you own the copyright to that, the trademark to that image, versus if you don't edit, if AI just exclusively creates it. So and we have a lot of that with Veras, as I mentioned, like these edit tools, these prompt presets, other things inside of there that help you curate your image. That does say you contributed to the editing of that image. So the other piece too that I brought up, Chaos has no machine learning on your guys' projects, just so you know. We do have a setting inside of Veras that also allows you to anonymize your data and to also say, I don't want my project to be used for machine learning. We do that as just like a cover our butts kind of thing, but we do not do any kind of machine learning on the back end, just so you guys are aware. So sorry, I think I saw another question up there.
No problem. We have another from Luis Garcia. Maybe out of context, but what's your opinion on prices ramping up drastically and the near future not having a normal CPU in home due to AI? Reports said that in the future we will end up renting PCs.
Yeah, great question. I don't know. I can't speak too much to the hardware piece of it, other than technology changes so fast, hardware changes so fast. At some point, does it make sense to rent a PC versus purchasing one if it's going to be outdated in a year or two? For the software price hikes, that's a very real thing and a real concern. The one thing I would add to this is the value add to these tools. I was just talking to Phil Reed the other day. I'm sure many of you guys know Phil, and he was talking about, you're paying for a GPU cost, and it costs, 11 cents or 4 cents or whatever it's going to cost. And you created, 1,000 renderings of that, and there's a cost to that. But how long would it have taken you to do that process manually, to build out the model and all that? So you should be able, the same thing for Glyph, there's a cost to Glyph. And I want to say it's like $60 a month or something like that. And the joke I always make whenever on calls is we just spent $60 talking about it. How much time do you spend, creating drawings and documenting and all of that? So there is a real concern for that, but the tools are getting better and adding more value, in my opinion, as a counterpoint. But again, this is just Bill's opinion.
Which is good. Very valid opinion. We also have a comment from Greg here. The Copyright Act excludes non-humans. It only protects human creativity. And I never thought I would come to see the day where we are discussing humans and non-humans rights. I feel like
very, very true.
in that game, Detroit Become Human.
Yeah.
we're discussing that kind of thing.
That's right. Yeah. We're not protecting the AIs. We don't care about them. So...
Yeah. We don't care about that.
I love that game.
You don't say that out loud, because when When the Terminator comes, he will remember
That's
that.
right. That's right.
Skynet's like,
Exactly.
you don't care about us, right?
That's right. Yeah. I don't know if you guys saw this, but it was kind of crazy. They had this experiment, and I'm fuzzy on the details, but they had all these agentic AIs that were doing all these things, and they set up a social environment for them. And it was like a Reddit for AI. And the AIs would like talk about, just like we are now, or you ask questions or talk about your day. And the humans were taking screenshots of the conversations that the AIs were having. And then the AI started in their own little Reddit version, like, hey, the humans are taking screenshots of us. And so it's very, very interesting. You are absolutely right, Rick, that the AIs are paying attention and everything is recorded. You know, they're going to have the memory of what we said. And like I said, I'm excited. I'm generally an optimistic person, my personality. But then part of me gets a little nervous, you know, with some of this tech when you start seeing what they're doing and how much they kind of act like us in a way. So, yeah.
That's why I always say good morning to Gemini. I always say thank you. I always say please, because you never know, right? Maybe the time will come.
That's right. Dude, sorry. Did you see that? Like, I think it was Sam Altman was talking about this. Like, everyone's been telling, and I do the same thing with ChatGPT. Like, can you please, you know, give me an analysis of blah, 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 and then I'll say thank you or whatever. He was saying because people are doing this, it actually consumes more compute power when we do this by saying please and thank you, because the AI has to compute that
More
that
stuff
word.
to process, yeah.
Yeah, but it is funny. I think but if we want the AIs to be nice to us in the future, we need to say please and thank you.
But you know, it's part of their learning thing, right? They need to learn how we interact with other beings, right? So if we're not polite, maybe AI would just think that we're a bunch of a-holes. And it will decide eventually that, oh, you know what? They're not worth saving. Like, let's kill them all. I don't know.
That's right.
You never know, right?
Yep.
Michael has a question here. Maybe this isn't a question. I just want to know your opinion. So it is a question. We live in a world where anything can happen. Yeah, that sounds like a line from a movie. What if, in a few generations, artists forget basic things because of AI? Well, I can vouch for myself. I already forgot all the phone numbers that I currently use because I have them on my phone. So I don't think it's an absurd extrapolation here. And suddenly all these data centers are destroyed, for example, by a hacker attack. That would be a disaster for humanity, wouldn't it? We'd forget to do basic things.
Yeah, so this is about like a Terminator movie. I think for sure we have something going on here, some kind of Hollywood flick that could be there. So, but really though, the question is, I think, okay, so the first part is, could we get rusty or forget things? Yes. Ben on our team actually uses AI to code a lot of the features inside of Veras. And he's been talking about like how much he's been doing it. Like, you know, he kind of prompts and gets a feature, and then he looks at the feature and bug tests it and all those. And he's like, you know, I get rusty at this, and those things do happen. But to your point, it's like, do you need to have that information? If you want to, you could still memorize, you know, your mom's phone number or your friend's phone numbers, I guess. Or if you want to code manually, you can do those things. You can, as artists, know how to do those things. Regarding the data center piece getting hacked, maybe, but I think all of this is part of me goes, well, we have this displacement of servers, you know, in different parts of the U.S. and different parts of the world to protect them. And I think, I'm not an expert in this at all, but I think you could segregate those and cut them off from the rest of the world. So that way, if there was a virus per se, that it could not permeate to the other pieces. But yeah, sounds like a good Hollywood movie.
But is it a good movie or a bad movie, Ed?
Yeah, depends on what the ending is, right? No one loves a bad ending. You got to have a good ending, some kind of good plot, love story, and the good guys win at the end.
And then also that depends on who the good guys are, right?
Ah, yeah. Is it the humans or is it the AIs? Who's the good guys?
Maybe we realize that we were wrong all along.
That's right.
There's no way we can tell that. But you know what, about that question, I always ask myself, like, we are always all concerned about that, but maybe we are forgetting what our actual craft is about. Like I always say that we need purpose. So maybe when we get worried about like AI doing everything for us and we forget how to be artists, for example, or architects or whatever, we are actually ignoring what our craft is. And we are only taking the final result into account. Right? Like, okay, I can make an image. Yeah, sure. Anyone can make images nowadays. But what makes an image good? What makes a design good? Is it because it's well drawn or something like that? I remember when I started college, when I went to architecture school back in the 90s, because I'm that old, in the, like, it was not even late 90s. But it was early 90s. Anyway, I digress. I remember that I had teachers that would not allow us to use AutoCAD because they said that the computer did all the drawing by itself. That was the perception they had. So we had to, draw everything by hand. And if anyone here did that, you probably know how painful it was to write in the projects. Like, okay, I have to do all the measurements here and I have to write down each and every number with the special ruler and everything. So in ink, and if you got that wrong, you'd have to literally use a razor to disperse the paper. Anyway, so like, what is our craft? I think that's the main question here. Is your craft to deliver images, to deliver drawings, or to think and create the best base for that drawing, for that image? And not even John Connor knows that, I think.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, it's very true. And the I love the craft, by the way. Like, I really do. And I think it's important for us to stay close to the craft. I think our processes of the craft are changing drastically, very similar from the good old hand drawing days to the CAD days. So it's just the next iteration, the next evolution of the craft.
Yeah, and we should learn how to use these evolutions and to follow along. Now, we have time for one last question here from Muna. What platform do we use for Agentic AI?
Yeah, great question. So I think and I'm just starting to get into this topic, frankly. So I think there's some new tools that have been coming out from, of course, a lot of the big software players. So some of them, like Autodesk, is a big one. They have their servers where they have these different agentic APIs that you can connect and all that. And I'm sure they're working on some pieces for that. So there'll be some elements there. OpenAI, I've used that ChatGPT's agentic AI before. So they have a feature inside of that. Those are the two that I know of specifically that are most relevant, or the biggest players relevant to architects and visualization artists and designers. I'm sure there's plenty of others that Adobe and others are going to be coming out with. We're working on our own at Chaos, as mentioned. There'll be some things coming down the pipeline here very soon. But right now, there are ones that already do exist, as mentioned, from some of these bigger software companies, if you want, that you could start to leverage. And then the Claudebot, like, that was the other one that kind of blew my mind. I'm just in the last few weeks have been learning about that one. If you want, you can use that. Use it at your discretion. It has full control over your computer, so put it on its own little computer there, so it does not become Terminator and destroy all your files. But yeah, there are some of these agentic AI tools that you could start using even today.
Yeah, great. So, guys, I think that's it for today's session. I really appreciate all the questions and all of you being here. It was a very, very insightful session. And I know I don't speak only for myself, but for everyone here, Bill, it was Really, really interesting, really great. Thank you so much for everything, for your knowledge and your insights. And to everyone, remember, you get a follow-up email shortly with a link to this recording, so you can watch it and rewatch it as many times as you want in the future. And I'd like to remind you all to go to cgconnect.chaos.com and check out the full lineup for March. We have plenty of events, just as good as Bill's event here. And I'm really looking forward to seeing you all there once again, because this is what community is all about, learning and growing together. So thank you so much, everyone. And I guess we'll see you in the next one.
Thanks, everybody.